Do you think you understand the term as is? Well, I've got a case where the as is may not be as is. Does that sound crazy? It is. Stay tuned. I've got more to share. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Inside the Deal Through Michael's Eyes. This is a fresh take on real estate and business in general. My name is Michael Renick, and I am your host for this podcast. After a 31-year career, I retired from General Motors at the young age of 52, and I moved right into building my real estate career. I currently hold a Florida's real estate broker's license, and I focus on serving Florida's West Coast. This podcast combines both my GM experience, my real estate experience, but it goes beyond the surface. There's a lot of things I see out there that is not right. Business isn't done the right way. And we want to call people on that. We want to share our thoughts in terms of what is the right way to do that. And a big part of what we're going to do is about education. So today I want to talk about when as is isn't as is. And I have a guest with us. He's been with us many, many times before, Mr. Hankin. And before he cuts me off, because he is very modest, I'm going to say a little bit about him. This is a man I proudly call a powerhouse of legal insight, based right here in Sarasota. When it comes to understanding the intricate web of legal matters that impact all of our lives and businesses, Michael is second to none. His knowledge extends far beyond the basics, diving deep into the complexities that many of us might find daunting. With years of experience navigating the ever-evolving legal landscape, Michael has built a reputation as a trusted guide and advocate. But it's not just his legal acumen that sets him apart. It's his passion for empowering others with clarity and confidence. He's the kind of attorney who doesn't just talk law, but takes time to break it down, offering fresh perspectives that makes even the most complicated issues feel manageable. His approach is practical, insightful, and most importantly, action-oriented. Michael, welcome.
Thank you, Mike. We are really going to need to shorten that introduction. I feel much more important than I think I actually am.
Let me offer you, let's negotiate a little bit then. Would you find this fair? Let me run this by your wife and see if she agrees with it.
I respectfully decline to comment.
See, not in addition to not only the things I just shared, but you're a very smart individual. So I like that.
I like sleeping in the house.
So, Michael, if I completely lost it, I shared at the top of the podcast that as is isn't always as is. What the heck am I talking about?
So, you're absolutely not. There's two main forms of real estate contracts that are used in residential deals. And first, I should say there's no required form. So as long as you meet the minimum requirements, in theory, you could write up a contract on a napkin. I would not recommend it. We have two main forms of contracts which are commonly used. They were put together by a committee of the Florida attorneys and Florida realtors.
Attorneys put it. Oh my gosh! Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Know. Who would have thought? What the worst people to put together a contract?
Go ahead.
And so you have this wonderful group of dedicated professionals on both sides, of realtors and attorneys, who sit down and painstakingly put together these two forms of contracts. One is called the as is, and the other, for lack of another term, is called the standard. Now that's a bit of a misnomer, because the as is used in approximately 85% of the transactions where these forms of contracts are used, which is almost all residential real estate in Florida. And so the as is, you think from hearing the title, is just as it is. You know, you're saying, I'm selling it to you in its current condition. You're going to take it or leave it, and that's that. But all too often, that's not the case.
But let me interject for just a second. There are far too many real estate agents that believe exactly that. So when we submit an as is, and we'll go in a few minutes, the reasons why I like to use the as is contract, we have to many times educate the other agent that this isn't a take it or leave it kind of a situation, that no matter what the condition of the home is, my client's going to take it. Go ahead. Sorry for interruption.
No. You're good, and always appreciate any comments. So the as is gives the buyer an opportunity to go in and do an inspection. The default time period is 15 days, but of course that's negotiable. And then either terminate the agreement within that 15-day inspection period, or if they don't, then they accept the home in its as is condition. Now, what invariably happens is there is another mini negotiation within that inspection period. The buyer, with the leverage of saying, if you don't agree with me, I can terminate the contract. I prefer this form of contract as well because there's all sorts of things that you don't know about the condition of the house. Maybe the seller doesn't know about the condition of the house before you enter into it. And it lets you kick the tires, so to speak. You know, if you were buying a car, you might say, we agree upon a price, but I want to have my mechanic look at it first. And if my mechanic says there's something wrong, I don't want to be obligated to buy the car. And that's the same as the real estate as is contract. We agree upon a price, but I have this opportunity to inspect and cancel pretty much for any reason.
So ready for the first curveball?
Shoot.
So I'm the buyer, you're the seller, and my agent submitted the offer. You've agreed to the price. You and I are on the same page with that. But I get cold feet. I don't want to move to Florida. I'm hearing they actually have some challenges in some parts of Florida right now. So I want to get out of the contract. Can I do that?
Pretty much for any reason. The language in the contract says that if the inspections are not acceptable to you in your sole discretion, then you would have the right to terminate and receive a refund of your deposit. So your sole discretion is pretty broad. It is not limitless. So I keep adding these little words of almost any reason. If a buyer says has no investigations, let's say they put an offer on 15 different homes and they don't intend to ever buy any of them, and they never do any investigations, they don't look at them, they'd violate the obligation of good faith and fair dealing, and maybe then might not have a right to terminate. But absent something out of the ordinary like that, it's a pretty broad amount of discretion given to a buyer.
If the inspection finds something, and let's say it's minor or whatever, and the seller says to me, the buyer, that I'm going to fix that, I don't have to accept that. I can still walk away, can't I?
That's correct. Absolutely.
Now, under the other contract, under standard, I would be obligated to go forward if it's under the limit we'd agreed to.
Correct. So there, a seller would be obligated to fix certain items. And if it's under the limit or even over the limit and the seller agrees to pay the excess, the buyer's left in the contract.
So we've got this deal. You and I, you're the seller, I'm the buyer, as is contract. It finds a few things. And I come to you. What are my options?
So in an as is, you come to me and you say, hey, seller, the roof looks like it's going to cave in. I want you to put up a new roof or give me a credit for whatever, $30,000. And then I, as a seller, have an opportunity to negotiate with you and say, you know, Mike, I don't want to pay $30,000. You knew this roof was however many years old. You weren't contracting to buy a new roof. I'll give you 15 grand. And then we have an opportunity to negotiate now that we have additional facts. I think it can be done one of two different ways. I don't mind. Well, people can do whatever they want generally, but I think it's generally in bad faith if a buyer attempts to renegotiate for something that they already know about. Mm-hmm. So if a buyer goes in, sees the place, everything's fine with the inspection and says, I really wanted it to have green walls. It's going to cost me $10,000 to paint the walls. I want you to give me a credit for $10,000 or paint the walls green. To me, they're allowed to do that contractually. But ethically, well, I should say morally, I think that's in bad faith. They knew the walls weren't green when they went into the contract, and they're using that opportunity to just get something extra they wanted. And to me, that's not right. Now, if it's something that they find out during the inspections that they didn't otherwise know, then to me, morally, it makes sense and it's perfectly fine to have that negotiation.
So this is about business being done right. So picking something like that just to get out of the contract, contractually, they can do it. Ethically or morally, that's probably the wrong thing to do. But another thing that frustrates me is I get a buyer who's out of state who wants me to write an as is contract, and we do. But they intend to come down and look at it for the first time during the inspection period. If they don't like it, they want to walk away. Well, that's not fair on many, many different levels. Contractually, it's probably legal. They can find an excuse to get out of it. But one, it's not right for the seller. I understand. I represent the buyer. I get that. But my time's invested. The buyer's time's invested. They're taking it off the market during the inspection period. And if the market's a slow time, you don't want to do that. So there's a whole lot of problems with that kind of approach. But if this contract is used right, and when I represent a buyer, it's about putting the buyer in the best possible position that I can so that we purchase this home. This gives the most flexibility. It doesn't tie my hands. If there's something that's found that I don't like, it's all over. Or I could come to you and say, Mr. Hankin, I appreciate your position, but it's 30 grand for that roof. That hole that's up there by the chimney was not visible when I'm standing on the ground. So the inspector and the roofing company said it's going to take a whole new roof. It can't be fixed with just patching. So then I throw it back to you. At the end of the day, we either negotiate something we're both comfortable with, or at that point, I walk away from the deal. Is that correct?
That's right. It's 100% right. There's so many wrinkles too in the process where the standard contract, which isn't a great name for it, but it's what everyone calls it, fails in so many different ways. So the standard contract, a seller's obligated to repair things which aren't in working condition, which is defined as operating in the manner in which they were intended to operate. So how about an air conditioning system that is only lowering the temperature by 14 degrees? How about a house that's infested with mold? Those are gray areas. The roof is still keeping the water out, but if the house is infested with mold, nothing's wrong with any of the systems, unless, of course, one of the systems is causing the mold. But if there was, something that happened and the house is just happened to be filled with mold, but is otherwise working well, that's not covered. If the house is full of rats or bats, the house is still operating in the manner in which it was intended.
It's not covered under the standard contract, correct?
That's right. Now, if you find any of those things in the as is, you can say, whoa, I didn't want a mold infested, ratty batty house. Let's negotiate. Let's talk about getting rid of the rats or figure out what we need to do. And without an as is contract, you could be stuck with some of those things.
So here's a tough one that comes out. It's ready for curveball number 2.
Sure.
This is the tough one to handle. And I like to have these conversations. Actually, before we go into the inspection process, I like to have these conversations with my buyer and even the seller, so they're prepared. But so we get through, the inspection is done. Let's not talk about which contract yet. Let's talk about what happened. The inspector finds that the AC unit is working fine, but it's 23 years old. What happens next?
So in the as is, there's an opportunity for both parties to negotiate. Maybe the buyer was unaware that the AC was 23 years old, thought they were getting a new AC for whatever reason. And there's this great opportunity to renegotiate and to discuss it. We have a moral quandary, but that's separate than the legal one. On the standard contract, if that air conditioning unit is operating as it was intended, and there's some grayness in how much it has to be able to cool to operate as intended. But if it's operating as intended, the buyer's stuck with that.
So here's the way we get around that. When we're working with a buyer, before we submit an offer, we get in writing the age of all the appliances. I want my buyer to know the age of the AC system. I want them to know the age of the hot water tank. By the way, I woke up about a week ago to the alarm going off in my water pan under the hot water tank. So I have a brand new one now, but you don't always know when it's about to go. But so the thing is, I want them to know the age of the appliances, because I don't want to get into, it's 18, 23 years old. It's old enough to vote, but yet it's still working okay. I want my buyer to know that up front, because then the buyer can adjust their offer price, knowing for a let's call it a senior AC unit, they're going to have to plan on putting some money away for a new one, because anytime you're up at that age, and these are true stories, we've had many properties that the unit was that old, they're on borrowed time. So it's about hard work. It's about the broker giving as much information to the buyer as possible so that you don't have these pitfalls afterwards. Now, if it's an older unit and the inspector finds out that it's not blowing the temperature difference that it's supposed to, that's a different story. Then that's a negotiable item. There is a time, though, when I, representing the buyer, wouldn't want to use an as-is contract. And that was a few years ago, when houses were, if you didn't put an offer when you're sitting in the driveway, it was gone 15 minutes later. And sellers had the strength at that time, so they wanted the standard contract. They would fix something and you'd be forced to go forward. They weren't willing to do the as-is. So this is why an experienced agent or broker is necessary through this, with the background to understand what's best for their clients, to understand the differences of the two offer contracts that we have here. It's kind of frustrating to me when I have to educate the buyer on the other side that as is doesn't mean as is. And the way I approach that, for a newer agent, I ask them, have you done a deal before with the as-is contract? And if they say yes, and I'll just say, so we're on the same page. You understand as is doesn't mean as is. Because I don't want to have the conversation after it's presented to the seller and we try to go through some kind of negotiations. But this shows how complex real estate really is. And that's why I really appreciate that you agreed to share your thoughts and legal basis for this on this podcast. It's about education. It's about doing business the right way. We've talked about some bad ways to use the as is, but we talked about some good ways. Is there anything we haven't covered, Michael?
Honestly, I could talk for days about this. I think we've gotten all the important points, and always happy to be a part of the show.
No, I appreciate this. And I really want to thank you. And so my challenge, I'm coming back because I want to do everything the right way, is based on your earlier comments, I need to delete at least one sentence from your introductory speech. Is that correct?
Maybe more than one, yes.
All right. So we'll give it some thought. Michael, I want to say thank you. I truly appreciate your time. You'll be back for many more episodes. And again, if anyone has any questions, Michael, some people are going to listen to this and not see the video. How would they reach you?
You're welcome to give me a call. My phone number is 941-957-0080. And always love talking real estate. So call me anytime.
And if I could be of any help, my direct cell, because I believe I need to be available when my clients need me, not the other way around. It's not convenience. That number is 941-400-8735. Thanks for watching, everyone. Until next time, take care.